Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Parramatta River Catchment Group's webinar on the citizen science and our iconic species. So I'll firstly just go through some of the etiquette of the webinar, and we would like you to ask questions in the Q&A, and I'll monitor that. And I'm happy to take questions during the presentation, so so that you don't forget your question. Just put it up there, and we'll go through them. Where if we get lots of questions, we may run a little bit over time. And of course, I'm recording this for posterity, and we'll probably post it up on the Living River website. So welcome to Riverfest. This is our second webinar for the week. Firstly, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the Parramatta River catchment, the Eora and the Darug nations, and pay my respect to elders past, present and emerging. So the Parramatta River catchment is quite large. It's about 266 square kilometres, and there's 11 local government areas. So it's quite complex. There's lots of tributaries running into it, and of course it flows into our iconic Sydney Harbour. The Parramatta River Master Plan outlines the 10 steps that we need to have a healthy living river and to make the Parramatta River swimmable, which is our mission. Today we're talking about two of our steps: involve the community and bring in nature. Oh, gone backwards. So during the development of the master plan, we identified 19 species that were important for ecological health and also for water quality in the Parramatta River. And the community voted on their favourite species, and they became our mascots. So these 5 species are the bar-tailed godwit, the powerful owl, the long-necked turtle, striped marsh frog, and the southern myotis or fishing bat. You can see that the southern myotis was very, very popular. So yeah, so the 5 species, they represent the different habitats in the catchment that are important for ecological health and water quality. And some fit into more than one of these categories. So for example, the powerful owl has fits into all of those categories because it's an apex predator, and you know it relies on the terrestrial woodlands, the riparian woodlands, and the estuarine water, so it eats fish and fresh water. So it's very complex. So the catchment is home to almost 400 species of wildlife. In such a highly urbanised environment, many species are at risk due to habitat loss and fragmentation from overdevelopment, litter and stormwater runoff and other human activity. So yeah, so this diagram just kind of represents how complex the habitat is for our iconic species and how that impacts on water quality. So a key part of our master plan is to improve and create new habitat for these species through foreshore improvement programs, tree planting, and citizen science activities to help track our progress. So improvement in these 4 habitat zones will also help to improve water quality condition. So these diagrams are very dynamic, and so the blue lines, they represent positive effects, and the yellow is the negative forces that impact on the river. So you can see how intertwined they are, and what kind of habitats they need to live on. So for example, for the powerful owl, you need big woodlands with hollow bearing trees, a dense canopy cover, and a complex vegetation structure. But they also need some openness in their woodlands, and low-hanging branches, so they can hunt. So if the negative forces of clearing and fragmentation of these habitats will lead to decline in the species. So, and then if you're clearing riparian zones, then it causes can cause erosion of those riparian areas on the foreshore, and also then lead to sedimentation. So these are just a quick example of the different habitats and how they impact on the water quality, and the key habitats that these species do need for survival. So for the southern myotis, yeah, it really likes slow flowing water, and that really then helps it to fish, because it's a fishing bat. It's very cute. One of my favorites. And also the long-necked turtle, which is more freshwater and slightly estuarine. And they're very important. They need clean, clear water and for their habitats. So that's just a little snapshot of our 5 mascots. I'm only going into those 3. So today in this webinar, we're going to learn more about our citizen science program, and that we are developing, and how you might be involved in that. Well, that's the last slide, but I'd like to introduce, I'm just going to stop to share. I'm going to introduce Dr. Aaron Turak. He's the Principal Science Biodiversity Research and Assessment at New South Wales Department of Planning and Industry and the Environment. Aaron's working with the Aboriginal communities, local Aboriginal land councils, local land services, DPI agriculture, councils and other landholders on locally based biodiversity monitoring trials to help address critical gaps in biodiversity data across New South Wales. So the Parramatta River Catchment Group has been working with Aaron to develop a new approach to biodiversity monitoring within the Parramatta River Catchment. And so we've been developing this. So I'll hand over to Aaron, because he's going to talk in much more detail about this app and monitoring and so forth. So take it away, Aaron. You can share your screen.
Okay, can you see it now?
We can. Can you make it full screen?
Yes.
Great.
I think. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Is that good?
Yes.
All right. Well, look, thank you, Nell. And that was a great introduction. So as Nell said, I'm an ecologist. I've actually been working on monitoring biodiversity for almost 30 years. So that's my bread and butter. And, you know, a few years ago, I started a fantastic journey starting in the Mallee country near Munga National Park, working with Aboriginal communities. And that was my first experience of this, you know, exploring this idea of locally based biodiversity monitoring programs. And that's what I'll talk about today, essentially, mostly focusing on the Parramatta River Catchment. And a wonderful sort of new development in that journey has been working with Nell and the Parramatta River Catchment Group. Essentially, my job is to help track biodiversity change, help understand how biodiversity is changing, why is it changing. So I've called this, in this slide, I've called this the biodiversity puzzle. What it, what do we need to know about biodiversity? If we're concerned about it changing, if we're concerned about it declining, if we want to improve it, what do we need to know? So this diagram, I call this a time, space, species cube. And essentially, therein lies a lot of information that we really want to know about biodiversity. Let's take an area, Parramatta River Catchment. But this, you can do the same thing for whole of Australia. You can do it for the world. Essentially, we want to know in that area what species there are, where they are, and when have they been seen? Have they not been seen for the last 10 years? And of course, more information is better. How many there are of a particular species at a particular time, at a particular place. That's useful information. Then you can expand that to wanting to understand the health of individuals in the population. But let's start with this basic idea of which species, where and when, the space, time, species cube. And really the puzzle is all about, to solve this puzzle, to understand how things might be changing, we need to have a fair bit of that cube known to us. If there are too many gaps, we can't really understand what's happening. That's the idea. So big data to the rescue. We have now a huge resource available to us, and I've called it big data. Big data is a term used for really complex data sets that might have originated from many different resources. There's a lot of information there, but and it might be variable in quality. So it's a treasure, but you need to know how to use it. So the big data I'm really interested in is by species sighting records. So I put in sort of little graphics representing three on the right, the three different institutions, starting from New South Wales Bionet, and it's the gateway to New South Wales Biodiversity Information, where our department, the Department of Industry, Environment, and many other institutions first deposit the species sightings. Everything we deposit there then goes to the Atlas of Living Australia, and from there it goes to the Global Biodiversity Information Facility. The beauty of big data is that now I can go to the Global Biodiversity Information Facility and extract data from Mongolia, explore the birds of Mongolia and patterns of distribution or change over the last 10 years. Similarly, when we record data and submit it to Bionet, it'll go to Atlas of Living Australia, Global Biodiversity Information Facility. Someone from Mongolia can analyze that data. So there's something fantastic about what's happening here. But I really want to talk about monitoring, citizen science monitoring, in the context of how we can actually contribute to big data. And first I want to say something about how big data is used, but let's look at some of the big data from the Parramatta River Catchment. So since the beginning of last century, we've got in the Parramatta River Catchment 627 1,788 plant records, 231,437 vertebrate records, 455 species of vertebrates, 1,242 native plant species, 782 introduced plant species. Those are big numbers. So we know, you can say that based on these numbers, we know heaps about the biodiversity of Parramatta River catchment. And look at this is only the vertebrate records, about 230,000. So pretty much the whole catchment is covered, but there are some gaps there. Let's look at one application of big data. How do we use it? So this map here on the right is called a habitat suitability map, or sometimes species distribution map. So what we've done here is use big data, that is the data stored in these databases, to create a continuous map. And the probability of finding suitable habitat for this species, the southern myotis, is shown here as a gradient from blue to red. Red is the highest. So, but this map, look at this map. This is for the whole bioregion called the Cumberland Interim Biogeographic Region of Australia. And Parramatta River catchment in purple sits in that. Now, those green dots are all the big data we have on southern myotis in the sub-region. And if you look actually at the Parramatta River catchment, there are very few records there. So that alone would not actually be enough for us to make a good prediction of what's in the Parramatta River catchment, or what kind of suitable habitat there is for southern myotis across the catchment. So what do? We use all the data for the whole sub-region, create this map, and this map is created by essentially using about 70 or 80 environmental predictors to predict, and the historical observations since 1900 to predict where you might have suitable habitat for southern myotis across the region. And Parramatta River subcatchment is a subset of that. But we need the regional data to make that prediction, accurate prediction for Parramatta River catchment, because we simply don't have enough data from the small area of Parramatta River catchment. So we use the big data from the big region to predict suitable habitat locally. So, but the trick is this: these maps, you can generate a map. You can use your computer program to create a pretty map anyway, but they're only as good as the data used. So if the location information for these bats is inaccurate or really rubbery, like accuracy of 1,000 meters, or if there are huge geographic gaps, then it could be that there are still big geographic gaps in the sense that, Parramatta catchment is probably different from the rest of the Cumberland region. So maybe we're not representing it well enough. And of course, if there are identification errors, I mean, if 10% of these bats are great and broad-nosed bats that were misidentified as southern myotis, then our maps are going to be wrong. So this is an application. What do we use these maps for? I mean, these maps are just an example of the huge potential of predictions and modelling. So it allows us to identify within the Parramatta River catchment, what are the places that we need to protect and look after and restore if we want to look after southern myotis. for example, another application that I've used in my work with the Aboriginal communities, we generated, I was working in an indigenous managed reserve where we had about 20 species, and we were, our main focus was on cultural burning, Aboriginal cultural burning, traditional burning to look after country. And we would go out regularly in winter, typically in the middle of the night, and do cultural burns. But it was important to be careful about where to burn and what habitats to protect while you're burning. The Aboriginal people, and especially the elders, had a lot of knowledge, but some of that knowledge had actually been lost. I mean, they knew, for example, if you spot a bit of quandong, don't burn around it because fire kills it, and we want to look after that. It's a medicinal plant, it's a food plant, it's a cultural plant. But there were a lot of other special places which might have protected the threatened species. So what I did is generated species distribution maps like this one for the reserve to show where we are most likely to find threatened species. So for example, there was a threatened gecko called the jewel gecko, which lives in spinifex, porcupine grass. So while we're burning, porcupine grass is very flammable. So when you're burning, if you're not careful, all of it will burn. So if the map tells us that we're close to a really, highly probable jewel gecko habitat, we'd keep, reasonable size of porcupine grass unburnt. So that's one example of a practical application there. And I'm sure Nell could come up with umpteen application of this map for southern myotas. So getting it right is important because it's rubbish in, rubbish out. So while we have these wonderful modeling techniques and technological capabilities, we don't have good data to go into it. We're not going to get much use out of the outputs. So what I want to talk about here is really this idea of locally based monitoring programs. And they essentially, I was very much inspired by my work with the Aboriginal communities. Because what that taught me, I mean, they brought me out there to help building a ecological monitoring program to accompany cultural burning and to keep track of ecological change associated with cultural burning. And of course, I went there with my quite established scientific training and ideas. But I quickly realized that our training is actually quite different from the way traditional ecological knowledge practices or is used in monitoring. We are very focused, we try to break things down into little bits and follow individual species, but they look at everything. And the trick there, they talk about old people and how old people used to monitor country. And it's about listening and watching and observing everything that moves, that doesn't move, and making those connections. And so what this inspired is a program in which we're interested in everything. We encourage the communities while they're on country and performing ceremony or fixing tracks or controlling feral animals, just to observe everything they see and record things. And it's all about also connecting with country, being part of a country, watching, listening, learning, and sharing knowledge. And with a very pragmatic, practical purpose, looking after country. So for us in Australia today, locally based monitoring programs offer a huge potential. One of the reasons is that while we have a lot of money going into monitoring and research, if you look at each program, even the most exciting, big, large-scale program, I was involved in the National River Health Program in the 90s for 10 years. We had a lot of money, but it was a flash in the pan. I travelled everywhere in New South Wales for 4 years or so, analysed the data, produced a report. None of that monitoring is happening now. So we don't know how much the rivers have changed because we're not monitoring. So sustaining monitoring programs is an issue. Locally based monitoring programs done by local people passionate about their locality, building knowledge, and generating data at low cost might be one really effective way of sustaining monitoring in the long term. Also, the other thing is, I'm a scientist. I spend much of my time writing scientific applications for grants, trying to get money to do work. And the reality is this: you've got to have something sexy to sell, and you've got to choose your topic very well. And at the end, what ends up getting monitored is a small subset of what we should be recording. A lot of things that in the long run will prove to be really useful to know about are not being recorded. For example, in the Blue Mountains, when you look at the area severely affected by the bushfires, there are areas as large as 100 square kilometres in which not a single biodiversity observation has ever been recorded. Now, what does this mean? This means that if there were species out there and they were lost, we won't know. So what we need is a monitoring effort that is not, choosy and picky, going for the platypus or the koala, but everything, the small birds, the insects, etc. And it's locally based monitoring is about building capacity and knowledge. It's really about people who live in a place, passionate, and visit the place frequently, gradually building their knowledge, understanding, and then contributing this knowledge back and using this knowledge to care for country. So, okay, what do we need? We need a digital tool. We've got this fantastic technology. We need something to help us record the information accurately, but also at the same time, transfer that information to others and learn ourselves as we are engaging in country. But also some navigation capacity so we know where we are, where we want to be on country, within the catchment, within our location. And we also, apart from this digital tool, we need to work as a community of practice. We need to share our knowledge. And the critical thing for these local monitoring programs to be such sustainable, people have to be motivated and they have to earn it. Co-design and empowerment. There are hundreds and hundreds of apps, there are hundreds of citizen science programs, but very often it's one way. You record something, press the button, it's gone. You've got no control over the data, no control over the design. and sometimes scientists sitting somewhere else, it could be in another country or another city, use your data. You don't learn a lot, you don't control. And the idea of locally based monitoring is exactly that. Empowerment, community ownership. And this is why we have chosen for the digital tool, we have chosen to use CyberTracker, which was developed in Southern Africa, really primarily to involve Indigenous people, non-literate Indigenous people in tracking biodiversity and especially poaching. But now look at that map on the right. These yellow dots is where there are monitoring programs, community-based monitoring programs using CyberTracker, including Australia, all across Western Australia, Northern Territory, South Australia, many Indigenous communities, but non-Indigenous communities, researchers also. So this software is free, it's easy to use, and it's constantly being developed. A lot of these people who work on these programs represented by these yellow dots are a part of a platform, and they contribute to the new ideas about how to progress the software. Very importantly, it can be customized to meet local needs. Parramatta River catchment, just one reserve, Lake Parramatta Reserve, or Parramatta Park, or any scale you want. And it hence it allows co-design, and it's easy to see what data you've collected. You've got the data until you submit it. Even when you submit it, you've got a full copy of the data you've collected. Okay, so essentially, the idea here, CyberTracker is the software, and there's a mobile app. What we do for each locally based monitoring program, we create a project, a CyberTracker project. And there is one project now for Parramatta River catchment. So that's an app or a digital for the catchment. There's also one for just for Lake Parramatta Reserve and Parramatta Park. We can develop any number of such special localized tools we want. So how do you install it? You simply go to the Play Store or App Store. First step, install CyberTracker Mobile App, shown on the left here. Open once it's installed on your phone, open CyberTracker. Here you can see my phone. It's got all these projects, and including Parramatta River, which is further down the alphabet. You go to connect in this red circle here, and then it gives you a screen. At the top of the screen, there's CyberTracker, install the CyberTracker project. You select that, and then you select web install, and then you enter a web address. So anyone who's interested in working, at the moment, this is all in trial state, so it's not publicly released, but any of you who wants to use the Parramatta River app, and if you are interested in another region and we have an app, you're welcome to use that as well. I'll send you, or Nell can send you this this link. You enter that, and then bingo, you're off. So you can enter any number of upload any number of projects on your phone. Caution, they can be quite big because there are lots of images and sounds. So each project might take up to between 100 and 250 megabytes. So you've got to have some space on your mobile device, tablet or phone. And we're constantly working on the projects. And in fact, the idea is co-design. So everyone who's participating can add photos to the project, photos to the app, work on the interface, make changes, and So we're constantly changing it. Each time you open the project, it'll search, CyberTracker will search for an update. If there's an update, it'll automatically update it and install it on your phone. So I want to now talk specifically about the project, the digital tool or app we made for Parramatta River Catchment. And starting, I'll go through, I just want to go through the screens really. I think that's going to be a useful thing to do, and that'll give you a good idea of how it works and find your way around the app. Everything is significant. The cover screen is significant because this cover screen I made for the Lake Parramatta Reserve and Parramatta Park. And these photos were taken in those locations, so there are animals that are there. So your cover up is important. And what I found, especially out west, in working in the little reserve, when Aboriginal kids came for their own country program, and we gave them the app, they opened it, and they say the app says application for Rick Farley Reserve, name of the reserve, and they were so excited that there's a special app for the special place. So that's a symbolic thing, but it's actually quite important. So you can choose pictures that evoke country. You can put significant animals and plants. You can change it as frequently as you want. And we can have, for example, for the Parramatta River Catchment, we can easily have a collection of images at the beginning of each of the 6 traditional seasons of the area, representing species that are significant for that season. Things in flower, things that are migrating, things that are breeding. And of course, you know, the mascot species, current priorities, etc.
Erin,
yeah,
I have a question about, someone's asked, so you prefer this app over iNaturalist? So I thought a bit of a explanation about, I mean, you did go into it earlier, between, you know, why we use this and not those bigger fancy apps.
yeah. It's okay. It's not really so much about preferring. iNaturalist is a fantastic tool. You know, if you have iNaturalist on your phone, you get on a plane, you go to South Africa, you can record something. It's great. But iNaturalist, you know, has a number of options which gives you a little bit of idea what you might get, but it doesn't teach you about the local species. It doesn't, you have no input. You can't change the screens of iNaturalist. You actually don't have the data as well. So it's good for recording things, and it's got, you know, a number of different artificial intelligence tools, which if you have a photo, you know, it'll make 10 guesses, say, list them out of probabilities. But for example, the jeweled gecko that lives in Spinifex in Mungo National Park, when I put a photo of a jeweled gecko in iNaturalist, it thought it was a camel. Now, it's because of the algorithms, and it's got its role, and it's great for tourists. It's great for non-place-based activities. But I've had Aboriginal communities, for example, saying, we are absolutely not going to use that. This is, again, they're asking for things from us, they're giving nothing back. So there's no opportunity for co-design. And the Aboriginal community said, we're only interested in co-design. We're only interested in being part of something. And, you know, there are different types of citizen science. Locally, So it's not so much the app, it's the philosophy. Locally based monitoring programs is a different philosophy. So this tool is something we develop. We decide what it looks like, and you do too if you're part of the community of practice. And ultimately, every single photo in the app comes from your location. The information comes from your location. The app is structured to design screens to reflect your priorities. So I think this might become a bit clearer, especially if you're familiar with iNaturalist. While I walk through this app, you probably will see that there is a big difference. And I have to say that you should be able to use a lot of other tools. iNaturalist is one, but Merlin is a fantastic tool because Merlin's artificial intelligence mechanism is for birds, just for birds, but its photo recognition is far superior to iNaturalist. And especially for common birds, Australian birds, it gets it 100% right. So you can use Merlin in conjunction with this tool. I will walk you through the information we have about to help you identify things, but there are fantastic identification tools. Frog ID is another one. So, you know, there are lots of tools that we should be using in conjunction. I hope that helps. So now, when you open the app, there is a bit of an introduction. So this allows people to read about the local project, in this case, Parramatta River Catchment, overview, statistics of big data, a summary, you know, information about local flora and fauna, things to look out for. You can put in major announcements for the project. So the next, in the next screen, the idea is this. You have this in your pocket and you go, you're doing something. You're working on a track, you're cleaning a toilet in a national park, or, you know, you're engaged in ceremony, or you're just having a picnic. You start the app and put your name as a part of a start of an observation session and details. So that goes into the species record. And you, you also have to put a location description, which is not in great detail, but the location description is important for searches in databases. For example, if you put your location as Parramatta Park, then that means that in Bionet or in the databases, the location is Parramatta Park. You can do one search for Parramatta Park, extract everything that has Parramatta Park as its location. So this, while you're in a session, you know, during your walk or your picnic, every observation you make is stamped by these bits of information. Then you have the main menu. So in the main menu, start and continue observing is what you use to start to make a sighting. And each time you submit your commit your sighting to the memory of CyberTracker, it'll come back to this. So, and then you'll have to say start and continue observing. Another option is interactive maps. And in the Parramatta app, we also have explore the Parramatta River Mascots. So choosing interactive maps, here's a map of the whole Parramatta River catchment. And you can have, at the top, you can see that in this app, we have actually two interactive maps, one for Lake Parramatta Reserve and one for Parramatta River catchment. And then if you choose the Parramatta River catchment, this is the first view, but then you can expand it, zoom in as much as you want, pretty much and pan around to see the details. And while you're on the catchment, there'll be a cursor, cross line, green cross line showing where you are in relation to the map. Another option there I mentioned was the exploring the mascots. We still don't have a lot of information here, but here are the 5 mascots on the left, and you can actually, if you click and put your on the phone, if you put your finger on any of these mascots, the thumbnail, you will be able to see the full screen image, and if you press that arrow, you'll be able to listen to bar-tailed godwit, the powerful owl, and so forth. And so the middle has a bit of information. We can add any amount of information we want to that. On the right, you can see the yellow spots that show where bar-tailed godwits have been sighted within the Parramatta River catchment. So that's the information. So if we choose to start to continue observing, the screen you get, the screen you want to be on all the time while you're walking is this screen. And this screen allows you, when you see something, or you might hear a bird, you press the button on the top left and it starts recording, and you can look for it, you see it, you take a photo, or you can take a photo of the tree that the bird was in until it, it flew away just before you were going to take a photo. So also, with the sound, you might have recorded the bird calling for 5 seconds, and then you can speak into the microphone, add your voice, say something about your observation. So by doing this, you've actually recorded the hard evidence. So the next step is then to work out what you've seen. And we have simple categories, main groups of biota here. If you go for birds, then you choose which type of bird. Say you choose honeyeater. Here's a and then it'll list all the honeyeater species that have been observed, or in some cases in the reserve, Indigenous managed reserve I was working with, because there were very few historical records. I did species distribution maps for the whole region. So we predicted, and I had some input from experts, we predicted species that we should see there, find there, based on that modeling. So that list of honeyeaters there is the full list you can't see, is all the species that have been recorded in Parramatta River catchment. And some of these photographs are taken from within the Parramatta River catchment. Our aim would ultimately be for each of these photographs to be of individuals from the location of interest. So scarlet honeyeater, when you put your finger on the thumbnail, you get a bigger picture. That photo, I'm pretty sure, was taken at Lake Parramatta Reserve of a scarlet honeyeater. And you can listen to the calls by pressing that arrow. So if you know you've got a honeyeater, but you don't know, you can't be too sure about which honeyeater you have, you can just choose other honeyeater and commit your record. And it's at this point that if you have Morecambe's Birds of Australia app, you can go to that, read about scarlet honeyeaters and why they're different. What's the difference between a female scarlet honeyeater and a eastern spinebill, for example? So, use those resources as well. They've got a different purpose that they're developed specifically for for information about birds. So we don't have that kind of information. We don't even attempt to put that kind of information in our app. But if you're confident that you've seen a scarlet honeyeater and you're comfortable to commit that record, you choose create a bionet record for the species. If not, you just skip it. You know, next time you see the same bird and you're more confident, you can record it. Bionet has a number of observation types, and these are put in the database record. Observed is the most common type, but there's acoustic recording, there's burrows, scats, etc. So you choose your type of observation, and then there are two options. You can either use the current location, like you've just seen something, record it now using the GPS, or you might have not recorded something, you might have taken a photograph, or you know, you were in a rush, you saw something, took a photograph, and you came to the car park, at the car park you want to, you're under committed memory, then you choose earlier. If you choose just now, you then move on to number of individuals, and then you have a screen called Field Notes and Save Record, and there you can put any field notes you can write, or you can just go to the down arrow, press Start, and then you get the arrow on the right, which says essentially it's looking for GPS, stabilizing your GPS. CyberTracker will only record a GPS coordinate if it's accurate, within about 5 meters. And once that's done, it'll go back, it'll take you back to start recording, and you've got your data. If you want to record a sighting made earlier when somewhere else, you choose that option, you go to the calendar, choose your date, you type in your sighting time, and then it takes you to a map, and you can then put a flag on the location. As you can see here, that flag is put where that scarlet honeyeater was seen in Lake Parramatta Reserve. And what that'll do is then on the left, you can see, after you do this recording, you can go to Options button and you can see the details. So that latitude and longitude is recorded based on where you put that flag. And it says you've got a sound of a scarlet honeyeater. That's your record. Now, to submit, then the next step is to submit to a cloud storage, which is the step before we put it into Bionet. And to do that, you simply go to Send Data in the middle one you can see on the right, Send Data, and then you'll see this big black arrow, and then it'll say sending, sending, sending. It'll say completed, and then it'll say no data. That means your data is in the cloud. Then it's over to us, over to the coordinator of your community group to download it from the cloud, turn it into a spreadsheet, and then they will circulate it. In this case, it might be Nell or someone working with Nell. They'll get back to you, say, okay, you've recorded these species. Can you check these? Are you comfortable with these? Do you want any discussion about this? You want to talk to an expert or get expert advice about whether that species is in the location or on the plant that you're saying, or are you comfortable? If you're comfortable, then the data is submitted to Bionet. It's a permanent record, but it can be edited as well. Often, most participants are not very confident, but they're, they just want to have the option of checking. So they might hold off on a particular sighting. But then when they see the same bird the second, the third, or fourth time, they're more confident. they're happy to commit it to memory, they'll submit it. But even after you submit it, you can go and revisit and change your siting. And this is the beauty of locally based monitoring and having a community of practice. We've had around a campfire, you know, in working with the Aboriginal communities, around the campfire discussions about what we've seen, and so sometimes someone would say, "Oh, well, a couple of months ago I recorded blah blah blah," but it was not on spinifex, it was on butterbush. And someone will say, "Oh, no, it's not going to be that species," and then that'll be changed. But it's that sharing information and building of knowledge. So that's actually all I've prepared pretty much. Where to from here? I think the key is building a community of practice, or many communities of practice within the Parramatta River catchment. So at this stage, we're exploring. We have this tool. It's not finite. Any one of you can be part of this process. You can be very involved or very little involved. If all you want to do is to walk in your local park and record things, that's fine. If you want to contribute photos, sound recordings, that's fantastic. If you want to be part of designing the app or putting into the app, I'm sure that's fine as well. So co-design is the critical, I guess, the key word here. That's what makes locally designed, locally based monitoring programs very powerful. And it's about, we monitor, we learn, and we look after country. So that's all I have prepared, but
yep, that's great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Aaron. I've got a couple of questions. So Brad's asked again, is it easy for the public to join the CyberTracker project for Parramatta Lake, or for Lake Parramatta? And I guess if you're interested in participating, if you stop sharing, Aaron, I'll put up my my email address for everyone. So it's nell.graham@canadabay.nsw.gov.au. So just, yeah, get in touch with me. We've prepared a bit of a cheat sheet on how to download and use the app as well. And so we want to start this community of practice. And yeah, so it'll be, yeah, just reach out to us. And I will also, yeah, we've got your email details as well. So I will circulate a survey as well. And yeah, you'll have my contact details then too, so you can get back to me if you want to participate in this. We'll probably set up a little group and have a meeting about it, and then yeah, get observing.
Yeah, Nell, I'm happy if anyone wants to start using this app straight away. I'm very happy to pass on the details of the web link. And, you know, apart from your cheat sheet, if you want to use some of my slides, because there's some especially with the downloading of the CyberTracker app, and that I've now generated copies of my screenshots. But any of you, and also, you know, you can actually use the app to record species outside of Parramatta River catchment too. Just those lists and the sound recordings and images might not be there for that species if it's not found in the Parramatta River catchment. But look, anyone is most welcome to start using the app, exploring it, giving feedback. And I mean, these will be real observations. If you're comfortable with them, we'll submit them to BioNet and there'll be permanent records. And we certainly need them. So, yeah.
Well, that's right. So has anyone got any further questions? Oh, I think there's one. No, it's just a thank you, Nell and Erin, from Brad. It's wonderful to be involved in these projects. My only concern was that it was hard for me to join a project using the app, and this could limit the public contribution to data gathering. Perhaps I'm not doing it correctly. I don't quite know what you mean there. Have you tried to load it up? I'm not sure. Sorry, Brad. And yeah, so Jules says the flexibility within this tool is fantastic. Can't wait to be involved. Thank you. So great. Jules is one of our change makers. And oh, I've got a new message. I can't see it.
That's from Brad. Yes, but we can email later. So yeah, look, I'm very happy to talk to Brad as well now.
Great, great.
Please feel free to pass on my details to anyone who wants to talk.
Who wants to get involved, but we will try and start a bit of a group so we have that community of practice as well. Yeah. So I think that's it for us today. The Riverfest program is running until the 25th of October, and it's ending with a bang with our litter forum on the Monday evening of the 25th. And so if you're passionate about litter, we'd love for you to come to our litter forum and learn about our community regional litter prevention strategy and have input into that. I want to thank Erin for his time and for his passion about co-design of monitoring programs, and I look forward to working with everyone in taking this app further. So thank you very much, Erin.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, Jill says, are we recording feral introduced species and animals? And I think they are there in the app, aren't they?
Yeah.
So absolutely.
They are there, but I mean, you might actually find some things are missing because you know, that is one of the gaps. Some of the most obvious feral species, like rock doves, might not be adequately recorded because people are not terribly interested in them. But having those records is incredibly valuable.
Yeah, so if you see something, you take a photo and you upload it, yeah, and we don't have it, it'll be added to that list and into the app. So, all right, well, I think we've run out of time unless there's another question. Oh, there's one more. Oh, no, thank you. Yes, ducks all the time. So Jules is seeing a lot of ducks. And I guess people buy ducks and then they release them and they're not native ducks, and it is quite a problem. So yeah, take photos. Exactly. So thank you everyone for your attendance today. There's another webinar this afternoon at 2 p.m. that I'm hosting called Get Ready to Swim in the River. So it's all, it's in partnership with CAN2 Foundation, who raise money for cancer research, but they also want to get people active, and we're talking about the difference in swimming. So in open water, swimming in open water versus swimming in a controlled environment. So come along, and I'm also going to talk about the swim sites on the Parramatta River. So thanks again. Check out our website at Our Living River for the full program of events, and I hope to see you again online. Thanks everyone. Bye. Have a great day.